Hi, I'm Louis Falgo, and welcome to The Music Breakdown. And today I'm reviewing the new Swans album, Leaving Meaning. This album comes off of Swans' acclaimed run in the 2010s, namely the trilogy of double-disc 2-hour albums, The Seer, To Be Kind, and The Glowing Man. Now, following my Swans retrospective, it should be pretty clear that I adore this band, and I do think that this decade has possibly been their best yet. So, obviously I'm going to be very excited for whatever the band is going to give me going forward. And with this new album, Swans doesn't completely break the trend that they've set for themselves lately. The album's still a double-disc set, and it's still over an hour and a half long. It is shorter than the previous 3 albums, but I mean, once you get over that an hour and a half mark, your album's pretty damn long. But Michael Gira had made it clear multiple times that he intended for there to be a new incarnation of the band starting with this album. And I gotta be honest, I'm not sure that I really see that here. There is definitely a different approach here than there was on the last 3 albums, but the thing is that there are also a lot of similarities. Similar to the previous 3 albums, most of the tracks on this record are rather repetitive and very long. Now, there's nothing that reaches the grandiose lengths of songs like The Seer or Bring the Sun or The Glowing Man. The longest track here is only 12 minutes. But everything tends to draw itself out to get as much atmosphere as possible from these songs. However, where previous albums would take these long structures to make way for gradual builds to a climax, as was common for most tracks on the last 3 records, this album kind of eschews the climax formula. Some of these songs don't even really build exactly. They kind of just ride a groove and ride a particular feeling out for their length. Take the longest track here, The Nub, for example, which opens with some great bass and piano interplay, creating this really tense and terrifying atmosphere that singer Baby D comes on and provides some really creepy performances. There's also a lot of effects on her voice to make her sound like she's all around you at once, and as the song goes on, it gradually gives way to a drone that slowly builds in intensity throughout its runtime. However, it never actually reaches a peak. You could also take The Hanging Man, for example, which has a groove that would not feel out of place on To Be Kind or The Glowing Man, but the band just kind of rides it for the whole song, which is like 10 minutes. There is one point where the song changes and begins to progress, but it goes right back into that initial groove and rides it out for like 4 more minutes. And these are really 2 of the meatier tracks here. There are songs like the title track, which is really a long extended folk dirge that very, very, very subtly adds instrumentation, but never enough to where you feel like you're listening to a new song. It kind of just makes me feel like I'm witnessing some occult ritual that just takes a long time, I guess. But I do think that within this very subtle and repetitive formula that some tracks follow, Swans do manage to bring a lot of atmosphere out of these tracks, some of them feeling really tense and others feeling really beautiful. The first major song here is Aniline, which has a bit of a structure, but it does feel very floaty throughout its runtime. And this song is just gorgeous. One of the main things I want to shout out about this album is that the production is phenomenal throughout the vast majority of this record, and on songs like Aniline, it really takes these tracks to a new level. The first disc of this album is really effective. I think that the flow on this disc is pretty fantastic. While it is true that the title track grinds things to a halt, it does so for a good reason, because I think the band is able to pick this up very well with the closing track on disc 1, Sunfucker. And Sunfucker is great. This song would not feel out of place on The Glowing Man, although frankly I think it's better than most of the material on The Glowing Man. The progression on this song is very satisfying. It opens on these loud and intense strums with Gira practically yelling. And there are some phenomenal background vocals on this section that make it pretty transcendent. This gives way to a really cool groove that Gira just chants on top of, until eventually the song rounds itself out with some vocals from Jennifer Gira. It's a very satisfying track. This first disc really feels like it actually ebbs and flows. It uses the shorter songs like Aniline and the fantastic reworked Amnesia to break up the longer tracks, and it uses the longer tracks generally to provide additional tension or additional energy. But it's on disc 2 where I think this album starts to wear itself out. I mean, I just don't feel like they kept the flow going in this disc. This disc is structured very weird. I think the first 3 songs never have quite enough energy to complement each other, although they are all quite different. Their approach is pretty similar. And so in that way, it does kind of feel like the album is slowing down a lot here. And the worst part about it is that when the band finally decides to bring the energy back, they use the song Some New Things to do that. And I will say right now, definitively, that Some New Things is the worst song Swans ever released on a studio album. This song is utterly terrible. It rides this disgusting claustrophobic groove for nearly 8 minutes. The production doesn't work on this track. It's probably the only song here that I can say that about, but it sounds so muddled and stuck together like you can't take this groove apart at all. And on top of that, Gerard delivers a really monotonous vocal performance with some terrible lyrics. And it's hungry like a monkey. I can't get behind that. And then, even after that, the flow continues to be weird where the band doesn't seem to know how to close their own album. What Is This seems like it was designed to be the closer, but for some reason My Phantom Limb is the closer instead. And whatever the intention behind making My Phantom Limb the closer was, whether they thought it actually worked as a closer or if it was just intended to confuse you, it didn't end up working. But I will say that My Phantom Limb is a really cool song. It's probably the album's most lyrical track because that's mostly all you're getting. The groove is stilted and the band works in these really cool horn drones underneath it to build tension. It's pretty rad, but as a closer, I just cannot get behind that. The best track on disc 2 by far is It's Coming, It's Real, which is this folk tune that just lifts you to heaven as it gradually builds, Jarrah singing these seemingly cosmic lyrics as all of the instrumentation slowly picks up throughout the track. Again, I wouldn't say this song quite reaches a climax, but its progression is so satisfying. And it is on this song and some other ones here where you can really see the potential in what Swans are doing on this record. But I say potential because I don't really think that the band has fully captured it with this release. To me, this album sounds like a victory lap album. It isn't really substantially different enough from the trilogy to say that this is a part of a new incarnation, and I think it features too many similarities with that for the new ideas to fully come through on some tracks. Also, as a result of it being 2 discs again, I can't help but feel like this album just seems like Swans are just throwing out some new material and being like, here you go, here's some stuff. And the stuff is really fucking cool. I mean, there are a lot of really good tracks on this album, although nothing here stacks up among the best of the band's material. But this album just doesn't really feel like much of a unit. I am left wishing that Swans had cut things down and maybe made an album that's 40 to 50 minutes. I know it would be short by their standards at this point, but they've done it before, and I really feel like this album was calling for that. A 2-disc set just doesn't make sense in my opinion on this album. Because again, I don't think that Swans are really consistently giving us their best on this record. They do provide us with some new things, and I'm also disappointed by Cathedrals of Heaven, a slog of a folk song that uses these kind of underwhelming drones as the only point of release. And it's tracks like these, and even the title track to a certain extent, which I do think has an effective atmosphere, but is this really the best the band could have given us? Is this really the best new step forward? I don't think so. So I am satisfied with Leaving Meaning, and I'll go ahead and score it now. I would give Leaving Meaning a good 7.75 out of 10, because I do think this album is really good. I actually prefer it to The Glowing Man as well. I think this album has more frequent highs than The Glowing Man did. It's also more inconsistent though, and it never has anything as stellar as The Glowing Man title track, but it does feel like a better album to me. Though it is a little disappointing that this better album could have been even better, and I do kind of feel like it doesn't feel like the most fleshed out release the band's given us. But like I said, I'm still satisfied with this album. I think it's great. I just think that if the band releases another album at this quality level again, I would start to get a little bit more worried. Coming off of the trilogy, the band really could have given us anything. I mean, they've killed it for so long that they can, take a little bit of a break, take a little bit of a dip. But I'm curious to hear if they can progress this sound into something truly new to make a new Swans incarnation and really separate themselves from the long album, double disc, post-rock stuff they were doing this decade. While I love that stuff, I'm also interested to hear what Swans can bring to the table next, especially hearing songs like It's Coming, It's Real, where I feel like something really could get going here. But regardless, I recommend this album to Swans fans. It's not a good starting place. This is the kind of album you'll check out only if you're doing a discography run, to be honest. But if you are a Swans fan, then of course listen to this album. It's pretty damn good. Bye, guys.